They told me the city never sleeps, but on that night it felt like the lights were simply pretending. My name is Maya, and from my window the streets below looked like a painted map, each tiny light a life I did not belong to. Inside my small apartment, the silence was a physical thing pressing against my ribs. It had been 6 weeks since the funeral. 6 weeks since color left the world and everything became gray and muted. My mother had been my constellation. Losing her was like learning the sky had disappeared. The laughter that used to echo in these rooms, the faint perfume that used to linger on the curtains, all of it had vanished. The walls seemed to fold in closer with every breath. That night the silence was too loud. I could not stay in a place full of ghosts. I needed noise. I needed people. I needed the illusion of being someone other than the woman whose life had been emptied out. I opened my wardrobe like I was making a decision about reinvention. My fingers passed over the comfortable sweaters and faded jeans I wore when pain was manageable. Then my hand closed around a dress I had only worn once at college. It was a simple black dress, more refined than anything I owned now, but not showy. I felt ridiculous and strangely brave as I smoothed the fabric over my body. I dabbed a little makeup on to hide the hollows under my eyes. The woman who stared back from the mirror looked older, softer, and determined in a way that almost made me smile. I told a cab driver an address I had only seen in glossy magazines. The Meridian Hotel. A palace of glass and marble where people with other worlds lived. Its rooftop bar, the Orion, was exactly the kind of place I never imagined walking into. That was the point. I needed anonymity. I needed to disappear into the crowd. Stepping under the hotel awning felt like walking into another life. A doorman opened my door with a practiced nod. Cool air smelled of lilies and money. My heels clicked across marble that had never known my story. I felt like an imposter, yet the nervous flutter in my stomach felt almost righteous. I was someone else for one night. The Orion was everything the magazines promised. Soft jazz played. Candles flickered. The city spread out beneath me like a glittering promise. People in elegant clothes spoke quietly, their lives arranged and contained. I found a small table tucked into a corner where I could watch without being seen. I ordered a drink I had never tasted before, something sweet and strong, and I let it warm me like a small, honest lie. Across the room a man finished a business handshake and let his colleagues drift away. At 36 he moved through rooms like he owned them, but tonight his victory felt like an echo. He reviewed papers with his eyes, then cast his gaze over the bar. He saw me. Noticing someone like me should have meant nothing to him, but something in my posture stopped him. There was a weariness in the way I sat that made him pause. He crossed the floor with slow certainty, leaving his half-finished whiskey behind. He did not approach like someone hunting a conquest. He moved like a man who had to know the sad truth behind a pair of green eyes. He asked if I was all right in a voice that did not feel like a line from a pickup manual. There was gentleness in it. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my rent. He had the kind of hands that belong to people who decide other people's fate with a signature. My chest tightened when he spoke. His name was Julian. Mine is Maya. He asked if he could sit. I nodded, though I did not know why. To my amazement, I found myself talking. Everything that had been stuck inside me spilled out in a shaky thread of memories and small humiliations. He listened without interruption. He did not ask questions like a journalist. He asked small things that felt like invitations back into being seen. Julian made me laugh with a story about a disastrous investor meeting. His humor was quiet but clever. He did not fix anything. He simply sat with me as if my presence was a balm for him too. The bar emptied. The jazz slowed. When the lights dimmed, I felt something inside me thaw. We spoke about art and favorite books and the ridiculousness of city life. For 2 hours I forgot the hollowness. There was a warmth in the way he looked at me that had nothing to do with pity. There was a curiosity that felt like rescue. He was not a savior. He was a man who noticed. That night I let myself be noticed. At some point the conversation slipped into a territory I hadn't allowed myself to inhabit in months. He asked if I wanted to continue the evening. He did not ask in a way that pushed. He asked like a man offering a choice and waiting to be given permission. My old self would have said no. My grief taught me to seek comfort in small, borrowed things. I surprised myself when I said yes. The elevator ride to his suite was a private bubble of nervous silence. I kept my hands folded in front of me like I might break into confession at any moment. When the doors opened, we stepped into a plush hallway that smelled faintly of cedar. The suite was tasteful and uncluttered. He placed his jacket over a chair and moved with a respectful distance, giving me space in a way that felt safe. He told me that we did not have to do anything. The offer to leave or stay was an extraordinary kindness. The quiet voice that said the choice was mine made the fear inside me loosen its grip. I told him I did not want him to leave. He smiled like I had given him permission to be honest. What followed was gentle and slow and nothing like the messy, shame-soaked things I had told myself about myself over the last 6 weeks. He kissed me not like he was taking, but like he was asking a question and receiving a consent. He touched me with curiosity. When I closed my eyes, I could feel a careful reverence in the way he learned the map of my skin. He was patient and present, and when I felt vulnerability, he met it with tenderness. It was unlike anything I expected. It broke me open in a way that felt like sunrise. We did not fall into a reckless abyss. We moved together as if walking into a new country and learning the language slowly. He asked me before every small step. He kissed away the sharpness of my tears. He made space for the complicated mess that I was. When it finally happened, it was not the end of me. It felt like a beginning to something fragile and possible. Dawn came with cold light. For one blissful moment I felt a peace so intense I thought it might be permanent. The suite bore the soft evidence of what had occurred. A watch on the bedside table. A suit jacket draped on a chair. He was not oblivious to our differences. He had a life the size of a magazine spread, and I had a small apartment with paint peeling on the window frame. I felt like a child who had stepped into a mansion by mistake. I tried to leave quietly, but he noticed and did not make me. He walked me to the door and asked me gently to stay for breakfast. He asked for my number. There was no swagger here. Only a steady seriousness that made my heart both light and afraid. It felt fragile enough to break and precious enough to protect. I agreed to coffee and to meet him in daylight. The weeks that followed were a kind of dream. He kept his word. He called the next afternoon. He brought my favorite chocolates without fanfare. He arrived at my apartment with a small bouquet of wildflowers and complimented the painting I had shoved into a corner. He asked about my mother and listened to the way I made her laugh into memory. He did not try to fix anything. He simply was present. Love arrived quietly. It did not blare. It arrived like the steady tide. Julian took me to dinners that were not about spectacle but conversation. He introduced me to people who treated me like a person rather than a curiosity. He remembered the details of my small life in a way that made my ordinary days feel important. Yet with every gift, every car sent on a rainy day, a small knot of fear tightened in my stomach. Who would I be in his world? Would I ever belong? There were nights when I woke to the cold whisper of doubt. I was 23 and he was 36. He had buildings and a life that spanned countries. I had a rent check and a bicycle with a worn tire. People stared at us at galas. They whispered and tried to place who I was in his world. The impossible gulf between us felt like a canyon I could not cross. Sometimes I pulled back and he noticed. He would look at me not with impatience but with an openness that made me want to believe. One evening as rain stitched patterns on the window, I told him all these fears. The trembling in my voice surprised me. I imagined him talking about impatience, about the inevitability of differences. Instead, he took my hands and asked me to look at him. He did not see a naive girl. He saw courage, resilience, and art. He told me the truth of his loneliness and how meeting me had pierced it. His words did not erase the differences, but they made them feel bearable. We learned each other in small acts. He surprised me by remembering the name of a little pottery shop I loved. He visited my apartment without criticism. He sat on my couch and told me about his childhood in a way that made him real to me. He was not perfect. He carried scars and a guardedness that made me cautious. Sometimes I would catch him staring at the city like he was thinking of numbers and roofs. But then he would look back at me and his expression would soften. He looked at me like I mattered. Even as love edged into my life, insecurity never left completely. I worried that one day he would look at me and see me as a chapter that had served its purpose. I worried the gifts and the kindness were a temporary illusion. Sometimes when I walked through the grocery store or fixed a leaky tap, I imagined him watching a life I did not know how to sustain. But he kept saying small things that seemed impossible to believe. He told me that my art made him see the world differently. He told me that home for him had become my apartment because of me. It was a tenderness that softened the edges. Then the day came when the noise of the city felt different. A whisper that cut through the comfort. A message that arrived in the kind of envelope that makes the breath catch. Rumors and glances and the knowledge that love between two people cannot be isolated from the world outside. People noticed. There were cruel looks at charity events and unseen questions in men's eyes. I could see curiosity in heads turned my direction. Still he did not let the noise win. We had a confrontation that seemed small but felt like a test. A quiet moment on my couch where we could have chosen to walk away or to wrestle with trust. I told him the truth about how frightened I was of losing everything. He listened like he had been listening the entire time. He reached for me and told me that the world could say what it wanted. For him, I was not a rumor or an arrangement. He said those words in the kind of way that makes you believe them. If you are listening and you have ever been afraid to receive kindness because you thought you did not deserve it, then you know the trembling I felt. Every time he stayed, every time he remembered the small things, the fear loosened its grip and my heart opened again. We built a fragile peace. One Sunday morning I woke to sunlight on my face and his arm thrown across my waist. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. I made coffee for us and he read the newspaper aloud like an odd shared ritual. He told me he had a meeting later about a new building project and he laughed about a minor catastrophe in his office. Every ordinary thing he offered me felt like a gift. I loved him more for how normal he could be with me. Then the crack arrived. It came in the shape of a rumor not meant for my ears. A voice in a hallway, a glance that carried a message, a cold moment where I realized that love between two people can be a target sometimes. A truth revealed itself in a way that made the ground tilt. People had always assumed why I was with him. Some thought I was a project. Some thought I wanted what he had. The murmurs became weight. I confronted what I feared most. I told Julian the hurt the whispers caused. I expected anger, perhaps distance. Instead, he did something I had not seen before. He looked at me with the kind of intensity that made me feel seen and shielded. He invited me into his world on terms we could control together. He wanted the whispers to stop because they were cruel and because they were false. He asked for my trust and offered his patience again. That is when the choice appeared. A choice that looked like a crossroad. We could allow the outside world to dictate our fate. Or we could make a life that refused to bow to rumor. He asked me to believe in us. I wanted to. Each day I found more pieces of myself coming back. I painted again. I walked outside and noticed flowers. I laughed without feeling guilty. There were nights I still woke with the weight of loss under my ribs. That would never entirely disappear. But love had become the thing that made grief bearable. It was no longer the hollow void. It was an ember that warmed me slowly. He did not promise to remove the pain. He promised to be with me when it appeared. This is where I ask you something I have been asking myself in the quiet hours. When you are damaged and someone appears who sees the parts of you you thought were irreparable, do you let them in fully? Or do you build a wall because the fear of being abandoned is louder than the possibility of being loved? Tell me your answer in the comments. Would you trust love again after losing everything? Would you let someone into the rooms you have kept locked because of grief? If this story touched you, please like, share and subscribe for more true to the bone stories about love, sacrifice and second chances. Your voice matters to me. I read every comment. Thank you for listening to my night of fear and of hope.